Okay, so hello, everybody. Welcome to another social distance learning session brought to you by the Liberal Gun Club. Tonight, the bench doctor is going to be showing us how to make your firearm quieter. Not necessarily silent, like a silencer makes you think, but quieter. This is currently being streamed out of Zoom to Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook, not YouTube, because YouTube doesn't like it when people handle live firearms on live stream. It will be put up on YouTube later after Paul goes through and edits it. So everybody knows, all participants but the moderators and presenter have their video and audio shut off. Well, microphone shut off. If there are any questions, please put them in the Discord Q&A channel or inside the Zoom chat. We have several people watching for questions at the various locations, but the easiest way to get your question answered is to become a member and sign into Zoom so you can ask your questions live. Becoming a member is inexpensive. It's only $10 a year, and it brings other benefits with it. Feel free to join us in Discord for our usual after social distance learning shenanigans. The link to Discord is in chat. Actually, no, it's not. Now it's in chat. And now on to Scott.
Oh, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. And thought we hadn't talked about suppressors at all up to this point. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about them a little bit and explain what a Form 1 versus a Form 4 suppressor, what that means and how you, purchase these things and what happens, as well as kind of go over some of the different options available, the different designs and things like that. I'm not an expert at them, but I'm a Type 7 FFL, so I handle NFA stuff, and I'm learning more as I go. And there seems to be a lot of interest in this area. So first of all, I have two guns on the bench, a little 22 45 that's unloaded, no magazine in it. And then I have a P80 Glock 17 clone that is empty with no mag in it, because I need to show you one of the mounting decisions you have to make on the Glock style or Browning action guns. But we'll start off with suppressor versus silencer versus can. They all mean the same thing. The word suppressor got attached to it by the first person that did a patent on one of these. It was I think he called it a sound suppression device or a suppressor. And so that name, silencer. I'm sorry, silencer. And so the name silencer stuck, and people refer to them as silencer. But what it is it's suppressor. It suppresses a lot of the noise, but it's not truly silent. And Hollywood has done us no favors in, like John Wick movies and things like that, where they show people shooting at each other with suppressors and nobody hears anything. They don't work that way, especially indoors. But they do mitigate the sound quite a bit. And what it usually does, the objective isn't to make it silent, it's to bring the noise level down to hearing safe levels. And that's really what you hope to accomplish. And yes, more is better. The more you can suppress it, the better it is. And some of the high-end suppressors achieve that. But really, you want to look at how much decibel reduction you get and how what the average decibel output is. So those are the things that should drive your decision, depending on the caliber that you're shooting. And my understanding is hearing safe is 144 decibels or below. Don't quote me on that. Look it up and figure it out. But so you want to get something below that where your sound is below that number. The easiest guns to suppress, of course, are 22s. They're inexpensive relative to the more high-end solutions. And they're just plain fun. And the nice thing about a suppressor on a 22 is it fits, I have several 22s, and as long as it has a threaded barrel, it will attach to any of those guns. There's a couple of ways you can attach them. Some attach to a muzzle device. So you would end up buying a muzzle device for each gun. that the suppressor would go on. Some are most of them are compensators. Some of them are flash hiders. So what happens is that mounts on the barrel, and then the suppressor mounts to that. So what you would end up doing is buying a muzzle device for each of the guns that suppressor would be used on. And those can get expensive. They're upwards of, $70 to $100 for each one of them. Or you can get a direct mount, which is what all of mine are up to this point. I have a new one coming that isn't, but a direct mount just simply threads on to the barrel directly, as the name implies. And these are all suppressors that I've done. So they have my crudely engraved FFL stuff on them. But this is what a direct thread is. It just threads directly on like that. And these are pretty nice on a 22. You just spin off a little thread protector, spin on the suppressor, and go. And the sound suppression on a 22 is better the longer the barrel. With a handgun like this, you're going to want probably subsonic ammo. And subsonic, at least with my 22-45, cycles the gun just fine. But with a rifle, you don't really need subsonic ammo. The length of the rifle with the suppressor on it really quiets them down. They're very, very quiet. I was at the range the other day playing around with one, and the sound of the bullet hitting the steel was louder than the gun. It was, you just hear this thump and then ding, and then you can hear the gun cycle. You can hear the bolt, moving back and forth. So 22 is a good place to start. It's economical. There's a lot of choices out there. And that's if you're buying one through, say, Silencer Shop or, an NFA dealer in your area. And so when you purchase one that way, an already existing suppressor through an NFA dealer, what's going to happen is you're going to fill out some paperwork similar to the 4473 for purchasing a firearm, but you're going to get your fingerprints taken and you're going to submit a picture, and that gets all bundled up and sent off to the ATF, and your suppressor sits in the dealer's safe until and you're going to pay $200 for what's called a tax stamp. And so your paperwork goes off to the ATF, your silencer sits in the safe, and when the ATF responds back, they send you it's called a tax stamp. It's basically a document with kind of a stamp-looking picture on it, or copy of it. It looks like an old stamp, and that's essentially your registration saying, yes, the federal government is aware and you've been vetted and you're allowed to own this silencer. And and those are taking sometimes 9 months to a year for the ATF to get through those and send them back. And you have two options. You can have it done in your name, which then the suppressor belongs to you, or you can have it done in a trust, which is kind of a legal rabbit hole that I don't want to go down, but you have to make that decision and research those two solutions to figure out what's right for you. A gun trust usually is about $50 to get it set up, and then all your NFA items go into the trust, and anybody that's in that trust can use those items and can possess them. And then if somebody passes away, they automatically stay with the trust. They're not registered to a particular person. So anybody in that trust would then just take ownership of them. So you have to make that decision early on if you're going to put your NFA items in a trust. So that's what's called a Form 4. You fill out a Form 4, send $200, and wait 9 months to a year for your stamp to come back. The other way that you can do it is what's called a Form 1, which is what all of these are. You go online and you buy what's called a solvent trap, which is it's really funny. I mean, they sell you these things and they advertise them as, well, you screw this onto your gun And when you're cleaning the gun, you can capture all that valuable solvent that you normally would just throw away. So you can capture that 0.9 cents worth of hoppies and reuse it if you wish, but it's called a solvent trap. And then they call each internal piece, these are called baffles, but they call them filters. So, so you get this thing in the mail, and in an unmolested one is right here. Okay, this is probably for would work for 9mm, or you could drill it out for 223, depending on, and we'll kind of get a little bit into the sizing later. But this is what they look like. You can see the end is solid, nothing there. This side is drilled out for 1/2 by 28 threads, which fit 9mm, 22, and 5.56 guns. So this is what comes in the mail, and inside you have these baffles, these cups. Okay, and you can see they're solid there. There's there's no holes in them. The only hole in this whole thing is the direct thread. So what you have to do then is take this thing and don't do anything with it. Do not take a tool to this. If you want to try to use it as a solvent trap, by all means, go trap solvent. But if you're going to turn it into a suppressor, don't do it until the form comes back, until your tax stamp comes back. Trust me on this. It's not worth the trouble that you would get in for making an unauthorized suppressor.
I'd like to underscore that, if you don't mind, Scott.
Sure.
It's a 10-year prison sentence and a $10,000 fine for every NFA item last time I looked. So you really don't want to run afoul of the federal government. And every time that, like, let's say you had 7 of those, I don't believe they run at the same time. It'd be 7 consecutive sentences and $70,000 worth of fines.
It's going to be a bad day. Yeah. So don't drill these. It's tempting, like, it's just sitting right there. Just throw it in your safe, leave it alone, or use it as a solvent trap. And you fill out what's called a Form 1, which you do yourself. You go out to the ATF website, you fill out a Form 1. It's going to ask you some questions about the dimensions of what you intend to build. I can't remember all what's on there. I think they're primarily concerned with the length of it, but you might have to give the diameter. And so you send that off, and the ATF turns that around, sends you back your tax stamp. It's still $200. You're getting the same tax stamp that you would get if you bought the suppressor already made. But the Form 1s come back usually because it's an electronic form and it's directly submitted. They're coming back inside of 30 days. So that's a big consideration for a lot of people. They don't want to wait 9 months for the permission to use their new toy. So they're coming back pretty quickly. Some people get them in 2 weeks, but Form 1 is relatively quick. These are all done on what's called a Form 2, which as an NFA dealer, I make them, and then I just engrave them with my information, and then I fill out a Form 2 when they're done to say these things now exist. And then if it's garbage or I wreck it, then I have to notify them, hey, this NFA item no longer exists in my inventory. It's been scrapped. So these are all would be Form 1s for you guys. But I have to handle it a little bit differently. So that's the difference between a Form 1 and a Form 4. Form 4 is for an already existing suppressor that you're buying from a dealer. Form 1 is something that you're telling the ATF you have the intent of making a suppressor, whether it's out of a solvent trap or out of your own materials, your own design. I don't think they ask you questions about what sort of suppression you're going to use, whether it's K-cups or Monocore or what, but they are concerned with the dimensions of it. So Form 1, Form 4. So make your decision and have fun. A lot of people buy a Canon Form 4 and then start a Form 1 in the interim just because they get interested in it and want to play around with it. And Form 1s can be fairly cheap. This one is a little bit more expensive because it's titanium and it's what's called a Monocore design. So it's a little bit different. And these are a little bit more expensive, but still not as much as if you bought a 223 suppressor made of titanium from a dealer. So you can make these things probably half the cost and less sometimes for a Form 1. And be careful of buying these kits because a lot of them are getting intercepted coming from China, from Wish and some of those places. You'll see these, they call them gas filters and all kinds of things. And they're getting intercepted by U.S. Customs. And then they send you a nice little note saying, we seized your package. We determined that it was going to be used to make something illegal, blah, blah, blah. You can appeal it if you want, or just let it go. There are vendors in the United States. Quiet Bore is one. Form 1 Builder is another. Quiet Bore, they're a little bit different. So you go on to Quiet Bore, you decide what you're going to purchase from them, and then they won't send it to you until you've submitted your Form 1 and you can prove to them that you submitted your Form 1. Then they know that your intent is to build a suppressor legally. They'll send you the pieces. Form 1 Builder, on the other hand, just sends you what you ordered, and it's up to you to play nice and do it legally. I'm not advocating for either one. They both kind of make the same thing. My experience has been that the Quiet Bore stuff is a little bit better quality.
If you're going to worry about running afoul of having parts for a suppressor or silencer without having the stamp, you can also get the dimensions and submit the form before the actual pieces are in hand. And
yeah, you can do it that way because they're really just concerned with the dimensions. Like I said, they're not going to ask you a whole bunch of technical questions about caliber and baffle stack and all that nonsense. You just want the rough dimensions of what you're sending. But yeah, you could get the Form 1 in hand and then order and build from there as well. That is, if you want to stay 100% compliant. I would guess that if you had a solvent trap and you'd already submitted your Form 1, I don't think anybody's going to say anything unless you've already drilled it out, in which case you're on your own. But if you just had this and a Form 1 submitted, you're probably fine. I don't think anybody's going to mess with you. But it's up to you. You have to make those decisions. We're not attorneys and certainly not firearms attorneys. So anyway, that's how you do a Form 1. They send it to you. And then once you get your Form 1 back, your tax stamp, and you're ready to go, you can then turn this into a suppressor from a solvent trap. So the way that's done is different depending on what you purchased. You might end up with this as a drilling jig from Quiet Bore to do their baffles only. You wouldn't be, it's milled to just do the Quiet Bore baffles. I'll show you what one of those looks like. Let's see. This my Quiet Bore can get the baffle out. So this is a Quiet Bore baffle, and it's aluminum. So I would not run this with 223. I would use this for 22, perhaps 9mm. But aluminum isn't really a good material for high pressure cans. So what happens is, you take this apart, you would end up ordering one of these for whichever baffles you ordered. This one, I believe, is a 9mm. So let's see, it's a little bit tight to get apart. Come on. You could also make something like this. It's, if you have some machine tools or, know somebody that does. So this fits down in here. That, and this goes on top of it. And then you have this bushing that's the diameter of the drill bit needed for 9mm. You put this in your drill press vise and drill it out. And then that's how you do these types of baffles. This baffle is what's called clipped. Right here, you'll notice it looks like somebody slipped with a mill-in bit or something, but that's actually clipped, and it's done purposely to help disrupt the gas even more. The silencers work by, the gas comes down the barrel and it hits these baffles and it kind of directs it to the sides rather than straight down the middle like a normal bore would. It's slowing down these gases and redirecting them. And then these clips help it do that even more. And it runs into a whole stack of these, 8, 9, depending on the design. And that's what's doing the suppression is these parts. So these are called baffles. This type is called a K baffle because if you look at it, it sort of resembles a K. If you see them with this flat surface, that's a K baffle. The other type are, get one out here. This is another type of, this is a more standard baffle, but it has this skirt on it. This one is not clipped. If you were going to clip this type, you would do it on this face right here. You would just drill out about a half a width of a drill bit, depending on the size, the drill bit you'd want to use, and you drill it out on one side. The things that matter that you're going to have to decide for yourself, and there's opinions everywhere. There's a lot of good Form 1 forums out there to ask your questions, but it's this angle right here. You see this angle, the angle of this piece, this cone, makes a big difference, and the depth of this skirt are things that you have to kind of play around with or go with a design that is proven. And then another factor is how well this thing fits together. It needs to be precision machined. It can't have really sloppy loose tolerances or it won't work. It'll work. It'll suppress sound, but it just won't do it as well as a really well machined can will. And you can see this thing is filthy. And that's another consideration when you buy a suppressor, whether you're doing a Form 1. Well, with a Form 1, it's going to have to be user serviceable. If you're buying a commercial suppressor, you may want to look into a user serviceable suppressor because that will allow you to take it apart and clean it. Some of them you can't take apart and clean. You just run whatever the manufacturer suggests through it. And some calibers don't dirty up suppressors as much as others, but I wouldn't own a 22 suppressor that wasn't user serviceable because they just get disgusting. You can see how much crud is on here, and that's just a short trip to the range, that carbon buildup. So those are the things you're going to want to research before you do a Form 1 suppressor is the different types of baffles and angles and things like that. But there is a lot of really good information out there on how to do it. Another thing is how it mounts to the gun. They do sell caps that mount. This is a direct thread, so it just goes right into the shoulder of where the barrel is threaded. It just bumps right into that shoulder right there. That's one way to do it. It's cheapest and easiest. Or they sell them that thread onto muzzle devices. In this case, you see here is called a booster. I'll talk about a little bit about the purpose of these, but this Form 1 kit was made to mate to a booster with, to this booster with this thread pattern and pitch and all that. So you're going to want to think about that. And we'll talk about the booster and why you need it in some cases. You don't always need a booster. So you're going to want to answer those questions before you jump off and start drilling holes in your brand new approved kit. So anyway, let me set these aside. So once again, the different types of baffles are the K baffle and then the standard cone. And some people mix baffles up. They go with different degrees, different, statistics or elements of the gun. This is called a blast chamber. So what happens is this goes in, so this goes in where the muzzle threads up. And where's my baffle? Where did I set that thing? I put it. There we go. So this goes inside the tube right up against where the muzzle is. And then these cones, you can see it's machined out for this cone to sit snug in there. And then the subsequent cones just stack up against it until it's the tube is filled. And the length and thickness of this blast chamber is also another consideration, something that you're going to want to look into before you decide what you're going to build. Like I said, I would ask a lot of questions of people that do this stuff on forums. There's a guy on YouTube that's done an amazing series of videos. I think he's called the Suppressor student or silencer student. I can't remember, but he's a guy, he's done some really good comprehensive videos on all of the things that you're going to want to look at doing a Form 1 suppressor and all of the things that you're going to need and how to actually do this stuff. It's not really hard. You don't need a whole lot of tooling. It's fairly straightforward, but I suggest watching his videos. They're really, really well done. I would do that first, and then I would go ask questions because now you're going to be asking the questions based on some knowledge. So anyway, that's the blast chamber. Just another consideration when you're going to do this. I don't want to try to discourage you. I'm just trying to make you aware of the things that you're going to need to know if you plan to do it. And not all baffles require a custom drilling jig. But if you're going to get into this, is a heavy stainless steel baffle, and these things aren't cheap if you have to replace one. So it's cheaper to just buy the drilling rig, the drilling jig, and be done with it than it is to screw up a couple of them and then have to do it anyway. There's other ways you can do it, though. You can take this and put it in, you can make a fixture out of wood that kind of works the same way here, where you see you have this split here, and the baffle fits in there and it holds it nice and tight. And then you can use a screw or a bolt and nut to squeeze this down really tight and then drill your hole. So, you can make these things. It's up to you, and it's up to your skill level and confidence in doing that. So another type of baffle design is called a monocore. So I have this end cap, screws on, titanium tube. That's all it is just a straight tube. And then inside is this piece. Well, this is called a monocore, meaning it's just one piece. And the nice thing about it is that you just have this cap that screws on, and that pinches this between this surface and the cap, and that's all there is to it. With this piece, it comes pre-drilled straight down like that, except this end piece. You may have to drill this out to whatever diameter you need, and then you're going to have to drill out the cap. Now, a lot of these caps come, I'm trying to see if I have one that I can demonstrate this with. A lot of them come with a center marking on them. I don't know if you can see it down in there, but you can see right here that little divot in the middle. And that gives you a good indication of true center. You're going to want to verify that yourself, but generally these come off a lathe, and you know, a lathe is the easiest way to find a center. But you know, this is where the tooling kind of stopped, and that's dead center. I haven't found one yet that isn't dead center. So you would start your drilling there. And what I do, you don't want to just grab the appropriate size drill bit, chuck it up and just ram it through there. Because especially with titanium, the drill bit's going to chatter and wander, and you know, you're going to wreck this thing and then end up having to get another one. So I use these. They're for a lathe, but they're starter drill bits, and they're very fine tipped, and they work great to drill just a tiny little pilot hole. And then you can get a regular drill bit and step it up. Just do it a little bit at a time until you get to the finished diameter. But I don't recommend just powering through it with a straight up drill bit. So take your time and be careful, and deburr it when it's done. Just get I don't know if you have to get a file or some sandpaper or something, and just deburr the hole and keep it smooth. Then once you get all of these pieces drilled the way you want, you're going to want to try to check concentricity and make sure that these holes line up perfectly with the bore of your gun. And one way to do that is to go out to McMaster Carr and order a piece of, they have bar stock, you know, metal rods that are perfectly true. They're machined to an exact diameter. And you want to get one, you know, a little bit longer than your suppressor, you know, preferably about a foot long. And you can use that to drop through these holes and make sure that it doesn't hit anything on the way down, and that it aligns with your barrel. So, you know, they make concentricity gauges. They'll sell you one for a lot of money, or you can go out to McMaster Carr and just buy one and call it what you want. But you want to check the concentricity. If you don't, you may get what's called a baffle strike, where the bullet coming out of the gun hits something inside, just nicks the edge, and that will ruin the baffle. And it could potentially be very, very dangerous. You don't want baffle strikes. The bullet may come apart inside the suppressor. It may come out the barrel, but it's going to wreck some stuff while it's going. And I've only had one, and it was on the outside of one of these, you know, like right on the very edge there. And what I determined, all of the baffles were good and the concentricity was good, but I think the cap wasn't tightened down as tight as it needed to be. So there was probably a little bit of play, and that's what caused the baffle strike. So I had to call the vendor and order another end cap and drill it and reinstall it. Fortunately, that's all that was damaged, because one thing about suppressors, it's a weird quirk of the law as it stands right now, that you have to take your NFA item to an NFA dealer or an NFA gunsmith to work on it. By law, you can't just order the pieces. You can do it pre-form one, but technically you can't take your suppressor and open it up and work on it and replace parts. What you choose to do is your business. I'm just telling you what the law says. If you wanted to follow the letter of the law, you would take it all into a guy like me, and I would do exactly what you would do, but I'm going to charge you to do it. So read the law carefully and understand it. There is a motion before the ATF right now to only consider the tube itself as the suppressor. So anything else you could replace or repair yourself, and it would only be the tube that you couldn't modify. But that's not the law yet. Right now, any piece of a suppressor is basically the suppressor, according to the law. So it's interesting. You're the manufacturer, and it has to be worked on by a manufacturer. Now, I don't know if a Form 1, if you can do the work yourself on changing the Form 1 suppressor, because you are the manufacturer. I would call the ATF and ask them, and don't be intimidated. The people that answer the phone at the ATF are great at getting back to you and researching the answer for you.
There's a little bit of clarity on that from our other resident NFA expert who isn't on here now. John is talking about how the Form 1 only gives you permission to build the NFA item. You can't service them.
Yeah,
yourself.
that's what I thought. Yeah, but I wasn't sure. But that's good to know. I'm glad that we have somebody that knows that, because you definitely want to be careful.
Well, and the other part to bring up here is that BATFE makes changes without major notification. Like, they'll have stuff on their website, or they will send out a press release or whatever, and they'll make rule changes, and there will be a time to comment on it. But sometimes they release these things saying this is now an NFA item, or this is not an NFA item. So when in doubt, call them, like you said earlier.
Yeah, and they've been fine for me to deal with. To call them up and say, "Hey, I'm doing this. What does the law say? What can I or can't I do?" And they'll answer the question, or they'll get back to you with the correct answer. Don't be intimidated to call them, and you're not going to get on some watch list. They already know you have this stuff, so don't use the resource. So anyway, that's some of the things to consider if you're going to do these Form 1s. And then once you're done with it, you need to then take it to somebody and get it engraved. And when you fill out the form, you're giving this suppressor a serial number. You can make it up. It's your serial number. You make it up. You have to have that engraved on the can, as well as, I believe, your name and the city you live in. Or I think that's what I have to engrave on mine when I build them as a Type 7, is I have to put my name or the name of the company, the city, and the serial number. You engrave those, and you can take them to trophy shops. There is an ATF spec on how deep and how big the font has to be. I believe it's 1/16 of an inch, and 0.003 is the depth. Don't quote me on that, but that's what the law says that the engraving needs to be. And it can be, if I'm not mistaken, it can be anywhere. It can be on the middle of it, or it can be down here, but it has to exist on the suppressor. So that's another consideration, and it's, I guess, $25 to probably $50 to do it, to have it done. The gotcha there is you have to be careful, because the person doing the engraving, unless they're a gun shop, is not an FFL. So you would have.
Scott, I think we lost you again there because the video froze and we can't hear you. Lonnie or Danny, can either of you say something to make sure that it's not me that's frozen?
Yeah, it's not you.
Okay, Scott, are you there?
Let me check.
Yeah, it looks like your video is frozen, Scott.
Do you hear me though?
We can hear you now.
We hear you fine.
Okay. Well, I'll try to. Let me see here. You see my hand?
No, you're back.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, you have to get it engraved. You have to be there, because unless it's a gun shop, they're not an FFL. They're legally not able to just take NFA items and hold them overnight. I'm going to buy a machine that allows me to engrave stuff so that I can offer that as a service to people. So you could bring your NFA item over to me, and I can engrave it for you, or you can leave it here. I can engrave it and you can come pick it up. But that's something to consider when you get it engraved. Be careful. You don't want to leave that thing overnight. You want to be there while they do it. Let's see. And that's something that the engraver may not be aware of. Some of them know that law, but some of them don't. So you're going to want to be careful. So those are the considerations when doing one of these as a Form 1. With a Form 4, it's pretty straightforward. You order the muzzle device if you want to go that route for each of the guns you want to run it on. And then you get the suppressor and you screw it to the muzzle device and you go have fun. Or you can get a direct thread, which doesn't require a muzzle device. The muzzle devices are nice because when you're at the range, you don't have to bring a bunch of tools and disassemble the front of your gun and put it all together, and making the RSO nervous because you're putting your hand in front of the bore, blah, blah, blah. So the muzzle devices are nice in that regard. They're some of them are quick disconnect too. They just click into place like a little ratcheting device. And some of them are threaded, and it takes a bit of threading to get on there. One thing I was going to talk about, boosters. So this is called a booster. Let me show you what it does. And
that's also called a Nielsen device, correct?
Yeah,
that's one of the questions that was just asked.
Yeah. So what this does is right now, let me empty this out and put it on here. Make sure, is that the right thread? It's got to be. So what happens is on a Browning action gun, the barrel tilts, and sometimes there's a couple of reasons you'd want a booster. In some cases, as the slide comes back, the can will hit right here, and so the slide will only come back like that far. Which of course gives you a single shot. You don't want that. And sometimes you don't have enough pressure to recycle or to cycle the action. So that's the other reason you'd want to get one. My understanding, and I could be wrong, like I said, I'm not an expert, but any Browning action gun with that tilting barrel is going to need a Nielsen device or yeah. So anyway, that's what that is. Inside there is, let me put it on and I can show you a little bit more about it.
While you're doing that, I'll mention a third reason for having that on there. It has to, when you pull the trigger, round goes down, the firearm barrel, etc., has to overcome having that weight hanging on the end.
Yeah.
So having the Nielsen device on there allows the barrel to move more freely than if it was just direct threaded.
Yeah, so it threads on the gun like that, and you can see it increased this gap right here. So now you'll notice that the frame, it looks like it's sliding forward. What's happening is this is coming back, the gun cycles. Before, if this little shoulder wasn't here, it would just run right into the bottom of the suppressor. So, but there's a great big heavy spring in there. I don't know if you can see it stretching, but there's a big heavy spring in there. So that's what a buffer is, or a Nielsen device. So you're going to want to see if you need one of these or not, and do your research, answer the question before you buy, because then you're going to want to make sure that the tube you're going to use is cut and threaded for the Nielsen device that you buy. You want to make sure that these two pieces are compatible. I think there's a fairly standard diameter and thread pitch, but I could be wrong. I've been proven wrong about a lot of things, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I would always make sure that your buffer is compatible with your tube. I'm trying to think, I suppose you could just leave the buffer on the gun and swap the tube, but that doesn't make any sense to me. I think I would just buy one for the can. Some of the other things that are kind of neat about these is these mounts. A 22 can will thread onto an AR-15, and you could shoot the AR-15 until you just absolutely destroy the internals on it. But the thread pitch for 9mm, 223, and 22 are all the same. It's 1/2 by 28, I believe. And so theoretically, a can will mount on all three of those platforms, the same can. I don't recommend putting your 9mm can on a 223. They're just different devices. It would allow you to do it. You have plenty of room. The gun will fire. You probably won't hit anything inside, but I think it's a bad idea. Plus, it wouldn't suppress very well because there's a way bigger gap there than it would be designed, than you'd want by design. If you're going to build a 22 can, these aluminum baffles are fine. They won't last as long, but if you're going to do anything stronger, 223 on up, I would get titanium or stainless steel. You can see this one already has some pitting inside from just a couple of range trips. So aluminum isn't the best material. Stainless steel or titanium. This is stainless steel. You can see how thick, and this thing weighs way more. And that's another consideration. It's going to be the length and the weight of the device when it's hung off the end of your barrel. So titanium is super light, but it's really hard to work with. As far as drilling and things like that, you have to go very slow and very deliberate drilling out titanium.
So Scott, we have some questions that I'd like to get to before we get to the end of the hour.
Sure.
Question number one, the BAT fee forms 1 and 4, that's a federal requirement, right? Regardless of whatever state you live in, if it's legal in your state, you have to do one of these.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't want to run afoul of the federal government. I know Texas they carved out their own little niche, blah, 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 but that has nothing to do with federal law. So be careful. Don't just go make a can because you live in Texas and figure that the HF is going to understand. They won't.
And they have said, because I believe there was another state that I don't remember off the top of my head that tried the same thing, that doesn't apply. Because even if it stays within the state, it's still interstate commerce. Next question: how often do you clean your suppressors? Like let's go with 22 suppressor versus center fire pistol suppressor.
The 22s I would clean every range trip. They get disgusting. I mean, the 22s are just dirty guns, and you don't want the diameter here of anything to get occluded with built up lead or carbon. So I would clean it every trip, but I'm kind of anal about that. I wouldn't let my larger suppressors go more than a couple of range trips without cleaning it. But I think it's up to you. I don't know what the recommended interval is, but I know that a 22 would require a much smaller interval.
Agreed. There is a question that was asked on our Discord that I would like to put some thought into here. Is it possible, feasible, or practical to have a single Canon tax stamp for multiple calibers? It is, in my experience. I have several multi-purpose cans. The problem with multi-purpose suppressors is that they might be great for a lot of things, but they don't excel at any one thing. I know, for example, I'm going to go off my experience. I have a Hybrid 46 by Silencer Co. And I have a piston kit that'll make it work on basically anything from 25 ACP to 45 ACP on a pistol, but it also supports things like 338 Lapua and 4570. And unless you buy the smaller diameter muzzle cap for the smaller calibers, you're going to have a louder experience than you would with, say, a dedicated 9mm can.
Yeah, and you can buy, that's something I didn't talk about, but you can buy different, if you go direct thread, these are 2 end caps for the same can. This is drilled, or this is tapped for 30 cal, and this is 223. So yeah, you can swap these things out. You can swap this piece out, or you can get adapters or muzzle devices. There's a lot of ways to do it. But yeah, I think in the beginning, I would maybe get a 223 can and maybe use it on your 22s because they're virtually, they're pretty much the same caliber. But then once you're done shooting your 22s, put it back on your 223 and fire a couple of rounds through it to clean some of that crap out of there, because it will build up a lot of crud. But that's one instance where you could do that and not be, you can go down from 223 to 22 and probably be okay. But I wouldn't go 22 up to 223 because it will just eat the guts up on that suppressor and you're out your $200 fun stamp.
Well, and the other part of that is it really depends on the manufacturer. I know some manufacturers say don't ever put rimfire through our sealed, non-serviceable cans because there's no way for you to clean them unless you plug one end and dump solvent in it. A lot of manufacturers don't want you shooting 22 through their rifle cans. Which brings us actually kind of to the next question. Do you really need a user serviceable suppressor for centerfire rifles?
No, there's millions of them made that aren't. It's just my preference. I like to clean and inspect stuff, but not everybody is, as fastidious as I am about it. So, no, it's not a requirement. Do as you wish. I like user compatible. I mean, plus I'd like to be able to fix it if something happened. I'd like to be able to take it apart and fix it, not have to send it back to the manufacturer and get it unwelded and fixed or replaced or whatever. I just don't want to get into a 3-month cycle of sending things across the country, especially NFA items, but it's up to you.
Well, and to reiterate, that would not apply for someone who doesn't have their SOT to do that themselves, because all parts are NFA items for a suppressor.
Yep.
Do you have a personal preference for your favorite combination of suppressor and firearm, like the thing that you found the most fun or that you enjoy the most?
I can't really recommend any particular suppressors because I don't own that many of them. And all the ones that I currently have are ones that I've made myself. I've got some commercial ones coming, but they're not here yet. But 22 is the funnest thing to suppress. And a 22 rifle is awesome, especially if you're going to shoot with somebody that's really averse to loud noises or hates wearing the ear protection. 22 rifle is really a kick to suppress. 22 pistol is also a lot of fun. When you step up to 223 and 9mm, you can get 9mm pretty quiet too, because they make subsonic ammo for it. And that's pretty fun to run 147 grain 9mm through a suppressor. They don't make a subsonic 223 round. I suppose you could hand load something, but it would be pretty useless as far as a bullet or as far as any kind of a defensive or useful round. But it's nice to be able to shoot suppressed because you don't have to wear nearly as much hearing protection, and you're not that guy at the range blowing everybody's eardrums out with a big comp on the end of your gun. But my favorite combination is a 22 rifle with a can on it, but others may have a different opinion.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on the hub standard, which is the 1.375 by 24? I believe that's what you were talking about earlier, with regards to most manufacturers going to a standard on the screw-in on the cylinder itself.
You mean on the buffer?
No, not whatever the
the end
trying
caps?
to think it. No, not well. It would be the end cap, because you can replace a direct thread end cap with a quick detach end cap with a booster assembly, and I believe that's what they're referencing here. The standard for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. I would say look it up because, like I said in the beginning, I'm not an expert. I just wanted to try to get people thinking about doing this, or you try to answer some questions for people that might have questions. But that question I can't answer.
For those that are following along on Zoom, we put the link in the Zoom chat that was provided by one of the fellow members here.